You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday, presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. Excited to get the wisdom from my man, Will Brinson. I feel like the Carolina Panthers need a deep dive this week. We don't do a lot of deep dives into one team, but I think anybody can relate on some level to what the Panthers are going through right now. So will join me momentarily on the big show. Patron of the day, Jason Granger. Welcome to the family, Jason. Patreon.com/RT Media. Love those of you that spread the word via social media at Ross Tucker NFL or at Ross Tucker Pod. And of course, take advantage of all of our awesome sponsors. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, as promised, we got my buddy Will Brinson. We don't do this often, and by this I mean sort of a deep dive into one team, but I feel like it's kind of warranted, right? I mean,
especially
they just fired a coach. Yeah, I mean, listen, they just fired a coach in the second shortest time in NFL history, and the shortest since like some dude for the Niners or somewhere in the 70s.
Right before they hired Bill Walsh.
Pick last year. I mean, they're on schedule to have the number one pick this year, except it's not their number one pick. They're kind of a mess. So I want to bring in my buddy Will Brinson. Does an unbelievable job for CBS Sports on a lot of different levels, including the popular Pick Six podcast. Check him out on social media at Will Brinson. Will, I want to start with this, okay? You're going to talk mainly about the Panthers here. What were your, and other people, just people don't know, Will lives in North Carolina. What were your and everybody else's initial thoughts when Tepper bought the team from Richardson? Because the end of the Richardson thing was bad, and I'm assuming people were like, oh, sweet, new owner, and he's like the richest owner in the league. Like, I'm guessing like the initial impressions were really good.
Yeah, so I wrote in the story for CBSSports.com, basically the Panthers have a David Tepper problem. And in it, I pointed out that the Panthers have become the new Browns. And part of that, Ross, is that, I remember writing for CBSSports.com a long time ago. Like it's been there for a long time, right? I remember Jimmy Haslam's opening press conference. And he comes out and he's bought the Browns, I think from the Lerner family, right? And he's like, I'm fired up to the max. And it was like, oh man, like how can you not be pumped up like this? Like Tennessee businessman is like, a volunteers guy. He's gonna come in and bring some of that like Knoxville swagger. Like, he's like flying J. Like I'm fired up to the max. And you're thinking like, yeah, like this guy's from the Steelers. He's amped up. He's excited. He's gonna bring this energy. And he gets there and he just can't keep his hands off the damn team. And he's like firing guys left and right. Johnny Manziel, he's drafting Johnny Manziel because a homeless guy told him to. Like all kinds of weird stuff. And then David Tepper takes over the Panthers and he buys the Panthers and he's a Steelers minority owner, just like Jimmy Haslam, or a former one. And he's immediately the richest owner by like 5 times any other owner, which is crazy because these are all rich billionaires. And Tepper buys the team and you're thinking, this guy's got so much cash to throw around. He's going to be in I think it's worth noting that, and Tepper made his money like in the financial crisis, like buying distressed assets. And Tom Dundon, the Hurricanes owner, Carolina Hurricanes, the hockey team, had also sort of had like a similar sort of pathway to becoming rich in terms of distressed assets. And he'd come in and done really good things with the Hurricanes. And so it sort of felt like, all right, this is going to be similar to what Dundon did in Raleigh. Well, Tepper takes over. And just like a lot of new owners, and this is why I think even if Washington is excited about Josh Harris, you got to be a little skeptical until you see what actually happens, like what moves they actually make. Tepper takes over and is pretty chill for the first year, right? 2018, Ron Rivera coaches, and then he fires Ron Rivera halfway through a season. And he's on his – it's like it felt like he was going to be hands off. He was going to be using his money. Like he was going to be willing to spend on stuff that you can spend on. Like he wasn't going to be worried about the salary cap. He's going to, he's going to spend up on coaches. And you saw that with Matt Rule when he hired him. But it's like every move that he's made has been so hands-on. It's like has his fingerprints all over it. And I think that's the opposite of what you expect when a former Steelers minority owner purchases another team.
So When did you first start to have concerns? When he fired Ron Rivera? Or did you think that was a reasonable thing to do?
No, I thought that the two things. One, it's like he fires Ron Rivera. I think Ron Rivera was probably at the end of his run anyway. And I never begrudge a new NFL owner for getting their own coach. Like, you just spent several $1 billion on a football team. You can hire who. It's your company. You own the company. You can, I think that there are certain things I would do if I owned an NFL team, but I say that and I'm not a billionaire, right? Like, I might act differently. I think that, an NFL owner who buys a new team and there's a bunch of stuff in place, reserves the right to build that team in the image they want. I mean, they bought the team. That's your prerogative. But firing Ron Rivera, a guy who'd been, one, he saw through the change in ownership with the whole Jerry Richardson scandal. Two, he had taken this team to a Super Bowl. Three, like, widely regarded, whether you like him as a coach or not, widely regarded as one of the best people in the NFL, I think, right? Ron Rivera, find somebody who's going to speak ill of Ron Rivera as a person, and I'd love to meet him. And so to fire him mid-season, after all he'd done for the franchise, felt a little off. And then you go and hire Matt Rule, and then, like, Matt Rule's first move essentially is to ditch Cam Newton on, like, an Instagram post on a Friday. It was like the timing. People kind of forget about it now. It's innocuous, but it was a little. And I'm not saying that you have to, like, pay homage to all these, people who. I just feel like there's a way to treat people who have been in an organization for a long time and who, borderline Ring of Honor dudes and guys who, won an MVP for your franchise. Yeah, went to the Super Bowl. That was a little odd. And then, just sort of the way that they handle the quarterback position, I think, to me, is like has been the biggest. The coaches and the quarterbacks have been the biggest red flag that have really. But yeah, I mean, like, I think Tepper was on the radar, his aggressiveness pretty early.
And so when you say they have a Tepper problem, it basically just means you think he's too involved, too hands-on, and he's the one pulling these triggers and making these mistakes.
Well, let me ask you this. Scott Fitter, and I mean, he's a noted trader, but he comes from the John Schneider, like tree of personnel management. Is John Schneider trading a ton of assets to move from 9th to 1st overall? Probably not. Unless you have an absolute conviction on a singular player who can change your franchise forever. And the Panthers didn't have that because they didn't know who they were going to get when they traded up. They just wanted to get a quarterback. And I think if you listen to David Tepper talk, you can hear him repeatedly. When he hired Matt Rule, this is like the funniest, I think let me see if I can find the exact quote, but when he hired Matt Rule, he had a couple quotes that I think are just hilarious. And there's an article on Panthers.com that's still up there. He references Chuck Noll, who took over the Steelers in 1969, right? It's like, he built a program that has lasted through 3 coaches, 10% of Noll. That's what I hope Matt Rule can do for us here. He's a program builder. Now, later on, he also says about Matt Rule, he dresses like bleep and sweats all over himself. He dresses like me, so I have to love the guy. I was a short order cook. He was a short order cook. Nobody gave him anything. Nobody gave me anything. He had to work hard for everything he got. It's like, okay, I guess, like, he dresses like bleep and sweats all over himself. Does it really vibe with Chuck Noll and program building? But whatever. I mean, the point being is, like, you keep hearing Tepper talk about program builders as coaches, and you keep hearing him obsess over franchise quarterbacks. Now, he's not wrong, but it flies in the face of building a program, of building a culture, of building a team in the NFL, and also simultaneously blindly chasing after the nearest shiny quarterback object. Like, they have paid Teddy Bridgewater a ton of money and only tried it for 1 year, and it didn't work for them, and they gave up on it. So they traded a 2nd-round pick for Sam Darnold and immediately picked up his 5th-year option, which is just ridiculous. Like, even if Sam Darnold has, like, a Pro Bowl season, just franchise tag him. It's not that much more. Like, you picking up his option was insane. The Darnold thing didn't work out, and so they trade for Baker Mayfield. And then that same offseason, they trade a bunch of assets to move up and get Matt Corral, who never played a snap for the team because there was a run of quarterbacks in a bad quarterback draft class. So that all fails. And then they're like, all right, we're firing everybody, and we're going to hire Frank Reich, and we're going to trade up and get a quarterback, and Frank's going to make that quarterback great. And then 11 games in, they fire Frank Reich. Like, it's it's the lack of patience for a guy who supposedly comes from identifying distressed assets and rebuilding them, and also from the Steelers is just it's stunning.
So let's talk about the quarterback thing. I want to give you just a blank space here to talk about Bryce Young, what you think of him, how you feeling about him.
Well, I think it was one thing it's like, what does an NFL evaluator think? What does an NFL analyst think? What if potential coaches think is maybe the biggest factor? I'll tell you what the fans think. The fans are like, we made a mistake. And it's looking like, Ross, that the Panthers may if they finish with the worst record in football, it's possible that they will have traded Jalen Carter, who went 9th overall, which was their original pick, DJ Moore, who they included in the trade, Caleb Williams, assuming he leaves USC and goes pro and is available at the first overall pick, and 2 second-round picks for the rights to choose Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. That doesn't look so hot right now. I don't think that Bryce Young has gotten a fair shake with this Panthers team. One of the things Joe Person at The Athletic, who does a great job covering the team, has referenced several times, I think it's sort of flying under the radar. When they hired Thomas Brown as the offensive coordinator, they had to integrate a bunch of concepts he brought from the Rams into Frank Reich's offense. And it didn't go smoothly. It's what's led to some of the bad play calling. It's what's led to Bryce Young not really – the learning curve has been increased, steepened, because of these trying to integrate multiple offenses, because they want there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. They had all these years of experience in there. Jim Caldwell now the special assistant to Thomas Brown, which is a whole why is Jim Caldwell the special assistant to the offensive coordinator? What are we doing here? And then look, Scott Fitterer. I'm not saying he made his decision to make all these trades, but he takes the blame for the roster as the general manager. And Adam Thielen's been awesome as an underneath weapon for Bryce Young. He can't be the number one. Jonathan Mingo and DJ Chark haven't provided that downfield threat that they need. Hayden Hurst, same thing. They cannot challenge anyone vertically. And my boy Ike Ekwonu, I love him, man. He's awesome. I think he'll be good eventually, but buddy, is he having a rough season at left tackle? We'd seen some progression late last year, and I think it's you have to wonder. He got torched for that final play against the Titans, and so Bryce Young has no protection. He has a convoluted offense that was pulling in multiple directions, and he doesn't really have any weapons. It's essentially the opposite of what CJ Stroud got in Houston. CJ Stroud got a Bobby Slowick offense that is straight out of the Kyle Shanahan stuff, but with integrated stuff designed to help CJ Stroud. An underrated set of young weapons who can challenge vertically, and Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and then Dalton Schultz has been a revelation for them. Really good head coach and a good offensive line. It's I think if you put CJ Stroud, I think if you flip Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, I'm not so sure that you wouldn't be getting. I don't want to take away from CJ Stroud because he's playing great football, but I think where you go and what's the system you're in and the stuff around you matters as a young quarterback. And I think you're seeing that in a very stark contrast between Carolina and Houston right now.
Sounds to me like Panthers fans need to drink some Labatt Blue Lights so that they feel a little bit better about their situation. Live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly beer. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Thought it was interesting that Tabor gets the job, the interim job. First thing he does reportedly is fire Josh McCown and Deuce Staley. Is that because those are guys that probably thought they should have been the interim guy? That's interesting to me.
This is Josh McCown's first NFL coaching job, right? Because he was a high school. The Texans wanted to hire him out of high school, and then obviously that turned into a whole thing. I think I'm citing Joe Person here, reading his article on The Athletic, but I believe it was Joe who referenced how it was similar to last year when Matt Rule was fired, Steve Wilkes takes over, and then Steve Wilkes fired a bunch of Matt Rule loyalists, like Phil Snow, I think, where he's Ed
Foley.
Yeah, exactly. And look, that's not unreasonable. Matt, these guys left They uprooted their lives several times, and they followed Matt Rule to Charlotte. No, look, they all got paid. It's fine. It's part of the business. It sucks. And they got fired midway through their, they're thinking we're going for a long time, and they get fired midway through the 2.5 years. If I'm Steve Wilkes, I understand why. I understand why Steve Wilkes would do that. And so I wonder, is that the case here? Is it like a power struggle situation? Because when you see Jim Caldwell now attached to Thomas Brown as the special assistant. And so it's like, were there factions within this coaching staff? And then you hear Frank Reich talking to Scott Fowler of the Charlotte Observer, and he said, this is probably the end of his NFL career. But Frank Reich said that he seemed to indicate like he might be done coaching. And so I sort of wonder what was really going on, what was going on behind the scenes with this coaching staff that maybe, we're led to believe, it's like this 200 years of experience. These guys, it's all-star coaching staff. Was there like a bunch of like faction, like Mean Girl style power struggle, like factions going on with the coaching staff?
What did you make of Frank calling him Mr. Tepper? Because as a former Washington Redskin,
Mr.
that
Snyder
raised an antenna for me with Mr. Snyder, with Frank calling him Mr. Tepper.
Everyone called Jerry Richardson Mr. Richardson too, which is a little. So it's not like David Tepper is like a Southern dude. He's from Pittsburgh, right? I mean, it's just like I thought it was odd. I thought it was. Although I guess I feel like maybe that happens more often with the NFL with the coaches than not. Mr. Benson, I feel like Sean Payton always called. He went like Tom's up there, like R.I.P. Mr.
Yeah,
Tom
you're
Benson.
probably right.
Yeah,
I don't know. From my experience with the Washington, I was thinking about that.
I saw that too. It definitely popped something up in my head. But I think sometimes the coaches do it out of deference. And I thought it was interesting. He said
they don't say that about in Philly. They call him Jeffrey Lurie.
They don't say Mr. You didn't say Mr. But I thought it was interesting too. Is Frank Reich was very adamant about he wasn't going to say, he's like, I have nothing bad to say about Mr. Tepper personally or professionally. We had our relationship was great. He did what he had to do. To me, it sounded like Frank Reich's been burnt out for like a month.
Yeah, but that's also what you say when you want to make sure you can collect the rest of your money.
Right. And you've got a guy who might be willing to sue you or you have like a non-disclosure, non-disparagement clause or something in your contract. You don't want to mess with it. Yeah.
Look, he seems like the type of guy that would try to find a way to get out of that. So
yeah.
Last thing, Will.
By the way, why do you think Matt Rule was like, you know what? I'm going to take this Nebraska money now, even if it's going to offset my Panthers money. I know I'm going to get this cash.
Yeah, I think there's probably some truth to that. Any hope, Will? Right now,
not much. I think the best possible hope for the Panthers would be that, and I mean, this is obviously the people are banding around the Belichick pipe dream. I mean, I don't think it's like that insane because they have a quarterback who played for Nick Saban, and you have an owner who might be willing to say, all right, I'm going to if Belichick's out in New England, I don't know what you have to give to get him. I mean, if he's going to be out anyway, it can't be that expensive. And
I think that's where he's going.
Carolina?
I think Belichick's going to go to Carolina or Washington.
Okay, so you don't think it's a pipe dream then?
Not at all. No, not at all.
I think
he's going to think the NFC South is very winnable.
Yes.
And
he can coach up the offensive line.
And he likes Bryce Young, I bet, and maybe he'll even bring Bill O'Brien. I don't know.
Yep.
It'll be interesting.
Or bring Josh McDaniels. Like a Josh McDaniels system would work really well with Bryce Young and that quick hitting stuff. You use that first pick in the second round, maybe you go sign a receiver in free agency or something like that. There's a pretty good list. Someone will get franchise tagged. But I think Tepper, that was sort of the point I was getting at. Is like somebody, like if they go and get Ben Johnson, right, and bring him in, Scott Fitter is almost certainly getting fired this offseason. I would be really surprised if he's not. I think he's going to take took the blame now. Scott Fitter's going to take the blame in the offseason. But if you go get Brian Johnson or Ben Johnson, or Brian Johnson, either one, and bring him in, you're ultimately going to have to find like some GM. You're just going to repeat the same cycle, right? Where you're like Tepper's going to be involved. If you go get Belichick and you make a splash and overpay the Patriots for him, and I'm sure they'd be fine with that, you can say, I'm giving you full control and then let Belichick run it. And if Belichick succeeds, which is, I think, not that unreasonable that the greatest NFL coach in history would do well, then you get credit for it. And if he doesn't, then you just fire him like fire everybody else.
Check him out on social media at Will Brinson. Does an awesome job. It's the Pick Six podcast as well. Will, you're the man. Thank you so much for the time, buddy.
Anytime, Ross. See you, buddy.
Man, that does not sound real good for Carolina Panthers. What does sound good? Speaking a second language. You know how impressed people are when they realize you can speak a second language, or even if you can just speak and understand a second language? That's why I'm all about Babbel. It works. Instead of paying hundreds of dollars for a private tutor or fooling yourself with language apps that are basically games, Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are designed by over 150 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. The key is it's designed for real conversation, and you can specifically look at the lessons you want to know, like restaurant ordering, stuff like that. And I got a special limited time deal for you guys, my listeners, to get you started right now. Get 55% off your Babbel subscription. I know some of you are going international over the holidays, or you just want something different as a holiday gift, but only for you guys. Babbel.com/Ross. Get 55% off at Babbel.com/Ross, spelled Babbel.com/Ross. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, we'll start. 25 Hall of Fame semifinalists have been announced.
And I'm going to make this my Labatt take of the day, actually, Jack, or Labatt take of the week, presented by Labatt Blue Light, the pristine Canadian Pilsner. Enjoy your beers together so you can live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. I encourage all of you, look at the list of the 25 Pro Football Hall of Fame semifinalists and tell me which guys are definitely not Hall of Famers. It just goes to show, number one, how hard it is to pick, and number two, how difficult it is to get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you go right down the line. Eric Allen, Jared Allen, Willie Anderson, awesome. Tiki Barber, Anquan Bolden, Jari Evans, London Fletcher, my former teammate, he should be in. Dwight Freeney, Antonio Gates, Eddie George, James Harris, another former teammate, Rodney Harrison, Devin Hester absolutely deserves to be in. Torrey Holt, are you kidding me with his numbers? Andre Johnson, Robert Mathis, Julius Pepper, Steve Smith Sr., Fred Taylor, Hines Ward, Ricky Waters, Reggie Wayne, Vince Wilfork, Patrick Willis, Darren Woodson. I challenge you, reply to this video with the guys that are absolutely not Pro Football Hall of Famers in your mind. It's pretty hard to do.
The Vikings activate wide receiver Justin Jefferson. They cut wide receiver N'Keal Harry.
It's crazy how a first-round pick like N'Keal Harry can all of a sudden just turn into, like, he's just a body there until they got Justin Jefferson back. Now they're getting Justin Jefferson back, and now Harry is exposable, right? Like they can cut him, move on from him, don't need him. That's big news, though, for the Vikings to get Justin Jefferson back. I mean, with the way Addison's been playing, they could be legit on offense if they get Dobbs or whoever's at quarterback playing a little bit better and have both those receivers now.
Colts running back Jonathan Taylor is going to need thumb surgery, and he will be out about 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, a little bit unusual in the sense that he played really well on Sunday in that win over the Bucs, and he played the whole game, right? But sometimes this happens. Just goes to show you, by the way, how tough NFL players are. Finish the game with a thumb injury that requires surgery. I mean, most people wouldn't have stayed at their desk for the rest of the day at their office job, let alone played in the rest of a pro football game.
And the Eagles cut Josiah Scott, and they will host linebacker Shaq Leonard after he visited with the Cowboys yesterday.
So I think now that the Eagles are getting healthier again on the secondary, they don't need Josiah Scott anymore. He was a guy that was kind of for emergency purposes, but now they're getting their guys back, so they feel better about that. And then, yeah, Shaq Leonard, that'll be interesting. You know, I'm not overly enthused about that for any team, just in the sense that the Colts were paying him a lot of money, and they still weren't playing him. And they cut him even though they owed him a lot of money. Not a great sign for Shaq Leonard. I think he's had 2 back surgeries. As a guy that had 1, that is not real good. Other than that, make sure you check out the Fantasy Feast podcast today and yesterday's Even Money if you didn't already. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Do you have holiday gifts for all of your loved ones? Your mom, your dad, siblings, spouse? You probably don't. And even if you do, you don't have the best gift. myfrontpagestory.com. It's written all about them. Backofficescheduler.com, go-bangles.com, steakhousesports.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, and the always delicious Pizza Boy Brewing.